and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Melissa Clark. Kevin Rudd is working at a frantic pace to try and tidy up a list of policy problems facing Labor ahead of calling an election. One of the key outstanding issues the government is trying to come to grips with is asylum seekers. And in case anyone had lost sight of what's at stake, 2 fatal boat capsizings this week have been a stark reminder. And with Defence and Border Protection rushing to the aid of another boat in distress this afternoon, the sense of urgency is high. It's one of a number of international issues facing the government that we'll cover on Capitol Hill this evening with our 2 guests, Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg in Melbourne and in Sydney, the Greens' Lee Rhiannon. Thanks for joining us both this evening.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, Josh.
Good evening. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Lee.
And look, to recap where we are, the Home Affairs Minister Jay Sinclair yesterday or earlier today explained the fateful events at sea north of Christmas Island that took place yesterday evening.
At approximately 6 p.m, the vessel began to lean to one side and passengers began jumping into the water. At approximately 9:20 p.m, Warramunga had rescued 76 persons and Albany had rescued 68. 4 deceased people were also recovered from the water.
I say to Mr Rudd, face the fact that you got it wrong. Be man enough to admit that you got it wrong. You caused this problem back in August of 2008 when you put the people smugglers back in business by closing down the Pacific Solution.
So it is a vexed issue for everyone in Parliament, and the government has hinted at some potential policy changes when it comes to the refugee determination process. Now, Lee Rhiannon, is there things that the government can do in this area, be it with international conventions that are involved, the Refugee Review Tribunal? Can the government actually do anything to change the refugee determination process?
Well, they should be doing their job. They should be abiding by the International Convention on Refugees that we're a signatory to, and the majority of Australian people really do recognise that we need to get it right here. It's very unfortunate that it's become a political issue, and I certainly extend my sympathy to the families who have lost loved ones in this week and the people who are working so hard to assist them. It's a very traumatic time for those people and for this country, but coming into an election, it's very disappointing to see Labor and the Coalition continuing to make it a political issue. Yes, we need solutions, and it needs to be international solutions that go to the root cause of why there are so many refugees, and we need to ensure that there are safe pathways for those people to come to Australia, because they do have a right to come here to be assessed as a refugee.
Josh Frydenberg, do you think the area of the refugee determination process of deciding whether or not someone can be classified as a refugee is something that the government could do to try and help stem this problem?
Look, this is just more talk from Kevin Rudd. I mean, I can't believe it. He's been in office in this second form for just on 2 weeks, and the boats have kept coming in greater numbers than ever before, and he's still proposing to just talk about the issue. We need practical solutions here. He was responsible for unravelling John Howard's successful policies when he won the election in 2007. Now he needs to go back to them. He needs to go back to temporary protection visas, he needs to go back to turning back the boats, and of course the offshore processing is a part of that as well. So they're the practical solutions.
But what we've had is the Foreign Affairs Minister Bob Carr make the point that the Refugee Review Tribunal has overturned a lot of cases in some circumstances. If we look at cases lodged in appeals by Afghanis, in the last financial year, of the more than 500 protests that were launched, more than 400 of them were overturned and found to be refugees by the Refugee Review Tribunal. So is Bob Carr right to be looking to this area to perhaps toughen up the system to be able to send a stronger message? I mean, you're talking about actual action. He's kind of hinting at something along those lines.
Well, I mean, he's had years in the portfolio to be thinking about it, Melissa. I mean, I can't believe we're giving these guys the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they've had all this time to deal with a problem that is just getting worse and worse by the day. And, you know, we need to go back to what works, and they need to swallow their pride and accept that they made a big mistake in 2007 and have been compounding that mistake ever since. And, you know, Bob Carr goes out there and says, well, most of the people coming here are economic refugees. Well, we've been saying that for some time. So why are you cutting the Australian Federal Police resource presence in Indonesia by 40%? You know, why won't you get better cooperation from our partners? Why won't you accept that Australia can take its own decisions in its own waters to turn back the boats? It's been done before, it should be done again. You've got senior military figures like Admiral Chris Ritchie, you've also got the former Australian Defence Attaché to Indonesia and Major Jim Molan, all saying that if the Navy are given the directive to turn back the boats, that they will. You know, the Bali process is important, and it was under John Howard that the Bali process was actually kicked off. And that is one part of the puzzle. But the other part of the puzzle is what is being done here in Australia. And Bob Carr and Kevin Rudd just don't want to go back to what worked under the coalition. It's time they swallowed their pride. The Greens, you know, complain that it's becoming a political debate. Well, it's becoming a political debate, Lee, because Australians are demanding answers. They've been demanding answers for 5.5 years. With you know, hundreds of people losing their lives at sea, money being wasted, and thousands of people in detention, more talk is not the answer.
Okay, Josh, let me put this to you because, of course, the Coalition has been promoting its policy position of turning boats around where possible. The government is putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that it is flying back Sri Lankan asylum seekers who are found not to be refugees, and say that's having quite a lot of success in being a strong deterrent, because it's not just sending people back to an interim or a transit country, it's sending them right back to square one. That, according to the government, sends a stronger message than towback. So would the Coalition support the government if they made moves to try and do more of that?
Well, Melissa, I'll put a counterfact to you, that the greatest number of people are coming to Australia at the moment by boat are coming from Iran, and they're going through Indonesia because they don't need a visa to go into Indonesia, and then they're hopping on a boat and coming to Australia. Now, Iran won't take them back, even though they're not deemed to be refugees. Now, why isn't Australia getting better cooperation with the Indonesian authorities to stop these people when they fly in from Iran into Indonesia from hopping on boats? That's where the action needs to be taken. I mean, the government points to Sri Lanka. Well, the big issue at the moment is Iranian people coming in an illegal or an unauthorised manner by boat. That's what we've got to deal with, the facts here, Melissa. I mean, I can't believe we're continuing to have this debate where we're accepting that the government can continue to talk. They need to do, and, you know, people are dying at sea, billions are being wasted.
All right, I might ask Lee Rhiannon's view on this, because I know the Greens have strong feelings about the idea of flying back asylum seekers in times even when they're not found to be refugees back to their source countries. If I can get your take on this, Lee.
Look, it's very disturbing what has happened with a number of people who have come from Sri Lanka seeking asylum in this country. There's disturbing developments in Sri Lanka. They've been well documented, particular persecution of Tamils, and then they have a right to come to this country. And the information that I've received from many quarters now is that the process has been totally abused. Many of these asylum seekers are not being processed in this country, and then they're just all of a sudden being flown out. So it's a very harsh, inhumane way people are being treated. And now we're seeing these suggestions that they might try and change the definitions of refugees in terms of trying to limit the number of people who can come to this country. So there's serious problems in how Labor is dealing with it. There can be no confidence in terms of what Josh is talking about, because he's implying that they will be stopping the boats, they will be saving lives. When people are desperate, they try and come here. And it's a reminder about the Howard years. Josh has reminded us. Let's remember that it was the former Prime Minister, Mr Howard, who changed the rules in terms of the numbers of refugees who could come to this country. Because previously, up until his regime, that what we had is that numbers of people coming to this country was just a quantum of refugees, and then it was added to by people coming by boats. What Mr Howard did was to subtract those people, the numbers start to crash, and it was the politicisation of this issue.
We will have to move on that one, because otherwise we're not going to get time to talk about some of the other international issues that have been prominent in the last week or so. And I do want to talk about about Kevin Rudd's trip to Papua New Guinea, because some of the other details of what's happened got lost under talk of asylum seekers. One of the things Kevin Rudd announced alongside the PNG Prime Minister Peter O'Neill was greater involvement of Australian police forces in helping out with law and order and PNG. Let's hear from both of the Prime Ministers.
It's important that we get this first deployment done and demonstrate to all concerned it's effective. These will be in visible policing roles, and we have to make sure that that has an effect on the ground. But if this goes well, then of course we will be open-minded to further suggestions from the Government of Papua New Guinea.
I think with the help of experienced, well-trained personnel joining our men on the ground, will certainly make a big difference in enforcing law and order in our cities and the country.
Lee Rhiannon, is this a good cooperative use of Australian aid and assistance to our neighbours in tackling what's been a pretty difficult issue for PNG in law and order?
Oh, look, the Greens are very concerned that aid money is again being misused. When we talk about law and order issues in PNG, I certainly acknowledge that there's parts of the country where there's serious crimes. But there is a worrying trend here, and this has been going on for more than 20 years, where Australian aid money is used to train PNG police or to fund Australian police in PNG, and often that's been in support of various foreign interests. There's an interesting study by Professor...
Do you think we should not be doing that training at all, or do you just not want it to come from the aid budget?
It shouldn't come from the aid budget, but there is a question mark over that type of training and then how those police, those PNG police, are being deployed. There was examples in the 1990s when PNG police trained with Australian aid money were involved in rapes, burning villages. There was cases in 2005 documented by Professor Andrew Lucas where again AusAid money was being used for local police operations, and then those police were assisting Malaysian logging companies.
Okay, so
there's a big question mark.
Yeah, so there are concerns there. Josh Frydenberg, I do want to ask you your opinion on another issue that came up in that meeting, that is Australia announcing special queues at Brisbane and Cairns Airport for PNG passport holders. PNG have made their displeasure known about the visa situation. Was this enough of an olive leaf from the federal government, or would the coalition be willing to go further and agree to PNG's demands for a more streamlined visa system and multi-entry visas?
Well, I know Julie Bishop is absolutely focused on deepening the relationship with PNG. Bob Carr's come to it very late. Kevin Rudd's coming to it now just because an election is about to be called. But Julie Bishop has made numerous trips there. In fact, I went with Julie Bishop to Papua New Guinea last year, where we met with the Prime Minister Peter O'Neill, and they have a very good relationship, and she is certainly focused on some of these practical initiatives about easing travel, the travel arrangements.
So just briefly, because we're running out of time, would the coalition be prepared to offer more than that?
I think we'll, absolutely look into this. But that's up for Julie Bishop to determine. But can I just say, it's outrageous for the Greens to oppose support for Papua New Guinea in law and order. This is a human right there to give people proper law and order.
That's certainly something I'm sure the government would agree with you on that one for once, but that's all we've got time for today. Josh Frydenberg in Melbourne, thank you, and Lee Rhiannon in Sydney, thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Melissa.
That's all for Capitol Hill tonight. We'll be back the same time tomorrow. Good night.